Yeah. So let's get started because I think we've got a fair amount to cover. So, do we have confirmation of quorum?
We do.
We does, okay. So I'll call the meeting to order. And I'll entertain a resolution to adopt the agenda for the 17th. Director Barker, Director Lott, seconded. Sorry, what? All in favor. Okay, it's carried. There's no petitions and delegations. Okay, we need a motion that the minutes of the inaugural meeting of the Committee of the Whole held January 24th, 2024 be adopted.
Second.
Director Wally and Director Mowini. Second. Director Mowini.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of January 24th that Director Sinnott was inadvertently missed in the list of directors in attendance. And as she nominated me for Vice Chair, at the beginning of the meeting, I'm pretty sure she was there.
Okay, so we'll have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended.
Move adoption as amended.
Okay, Director Mowini, seconded Dr. Raleigh. All in favor? Carried. So let's just skip through right to the meat of things. Staff reports. Pardon me. I'll accept a motion that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received for the Poverty Reduction Plan.
Move receipt.
Director Mowini, Director Baker. Okay. So,
Staff will present this, Mr. Chair.
okay. To staff.
Thank you through the chair. Just Edie is getting that ready to go. Okay. So thank you today for having this cow so that we could continue the conversation on the poverty reduction plan. We brought this plan forward because, of course, the board at their meeting on February 8th directed staff to apply for UBCM's Poverty Reduction Planning and Action Program to develop a regional poverty reduction planning strategy. And we were awarded $147,790 for this project. This plan, of course, was developed in partnership with the City of Campbell River and the Campbell River and District Coalition to End Homelessness. It's the culmination of extensive community consultation, including an online survey, in-person events, outreach to a community team of frontline workers, focused engagement with area First Nations and others, and interviews with people with lived and living experience of poverty. So just before we delve into the initiatives, just a brief understanding of what is poverty in this context. And we intuitively, of course, understand that poverty is when our lives are not in balance between the costs that we incur to live our lives and the resources that we have to meet those costs. And so with that understanding, we know that poverty is that imbalance when our costs exceed our ability to cover those costs. And then more elegantly, within the context of the plan, poverty is not having the resources, means, choices, and opportunities to maintain basic needs and self-sufficiency, which prevents one from having a quality of life that supports dignity and meaningful participation in their community. This plan proposes policy levers to bring more lives into balance through a suite of initiatives working on both sides of the equation through 8 priority action areas. Collectively, the initiatives form the 10-year action plan. And I think everyone remembers what the action areas are, but it's housing, education and training, employment, safe and affordable transportation, discrimination and stigma, social supports, income supports, and families, children, and youth. So actions within the plan are either direct actions for the SRD to undertake, they are advocacy positions for the SRD to request that others take, or they're partnership opportunities between the SRD and others. Going through this presentation, each of the actions that are in the plan have been identified as either the direct action, partnership, or advocacy, as well as whether they are short-term, medium-term, or long-term plans. And so you'll see the same color coding throughout. So for housing, the primary recommendation with housing is that we're prioritizing housing market need and not demand. So that's where we're looking to what the needs are for our region and ensuring that we have the housing sufficient to address that need. I won't go through all of the initiatives specifically. They're all in the plan and you've seen them before, but you can see how they are delineated between direct action for the SRD, the short term in there being our establishment of our housing service, a couple of registries that were requested, so supporting things like the home maintenance contractor registry is one that came from the community, identifying that there's difficulty in accessing qualified tradespeople to perform kind of house maintenance, and that's something that a lot of seniors in particular struggled with. A rental registry, again, same kind of thing, connecting those who want to rent out their property to those who are seeking rentals, and of course, regional housing strategy and our building service. Those are kind of the direct actions for the SRD. The partnerships, some of those things like workforce housing, these are actions that are already in process. We're familiar with that work underway. That's why it's both short and long term. And then also support for aspiring homeowners. That's something that would be done in partnership. And then the advocacy of looking to increased funding for non-market housing. That's something that is not a direct action for the SRD, but something that we would advocate for from higher levels of government. So that's how the structure of the initiatives are displayed on here. but we can go into more detail on them as part of the discussion. Safe and affordable transportation, similar roles here. You can see the direct action for the SRD is largely limited to active transportation. That is, unless at the bottom you could see proposing a regional transportation service. That's something that we're currently doing research into. And then, of course, more of the partnership and advocacy positions for higher levels of government. Discrimination and stigma is one that has a lot of direct action for the SRD because we have a direct role in developing a reconciliation framework for how the SRD interacts with First Nations and decisions are made. How we celebrate culture and whether our programming is culturally safe, and racism within our own practices. So those are direct actions for the SRD. But beyond that, there isn't much for us to advocate for outside of our own leadership in that regard. Families, children, and youth is one that understandably has less of a direct role for the SRD and more something that we would look for partnerships and advocacy, supporting others and amplifying the work that they are already doing.
If I can just interrupt you there.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the meeting, I failed to mention that there's today's what to do with the earthquake thing. It's going to be happening at 10:17 today. So your phones may go off. So yeah, and stand in the doorway. You got to crawl under the desk and hang on. But we can just pretend we do that and just keep going. Thanks. No.
So carrying on then, in the realm of social supports, certainly the direct action for the SRD is how and whether what we implement from the poverty reduction plan itself, the implementation strategy. But again, most of the social supports realm is in the partnership or the advocacy realm. Certainly, this is also true education and training wise. The SRD has a limited role in directly actioning education, but we do have a role to play in supporting student housing opportunities and in amplifying, again, the work that is already happening to provide educational and training opportunities. Income supports, very similar. The SRD does not have a direct role in supporting income or augmenting income. What we can do is advocate to raise the limit on earnings for people who are living on disability or other social income supports. And we can partner with others on tools and other opportunities where we can fill the gaps. Unemployment. The primary role for the SRD here is similar in that we're looking more at regional economic development planning. Strategic planning at a regional scale is an appropriate role for the SRD. As part of that, looking into during the research to see what a regional and a local living wage might be. That is one that we heard from a number of people through consultation, is that there is some question as to what is a livable wage in this area. That research hasn't been fully done and could be part of a regional economic development plan. So I think that the crux of the question is kind of what are the next steps with this? Today we're on plan receipt. That's what we're hoping to kind of conclude this piece of it as far as the plan development goes. And that goes into plan implementation, plan monitoring, plan refinement, and we're back to the beginning where we're coming forward with, the next iteration of any plan that we do. But plan implementation, that's where sort of the rubber hits the road. And so where we would take the initiatives in this plan and refer those out then to the Strathcona Community Health Network, for instance, for them to be able to identify which of the initiatives in that plan might be something that they can champion as that organization. And it's also something where the SRD board would highlight specific initiatives to prioritize and fund through the SRD's financial planning process. So it's very, very important to recognize that what this plan doesn't do is that it doesn't commit the SRD to any action. What it does is it provides a framework to address poverty, considering the intersectional impact of the plan's 8 priority areas, and suggesting a suite of initiatives that can be considered for future action. And that ends my presentation. So thank you for your time.
Director Wally.
Well, from my point of view, I see this study as a treatise on humanistic socialism. Reads like it's co-authored by Jagmeet Singh and Bernie Sanders, my way of thinking. Everybody knows that inflation is a major contributing factor to poverty, and that government spending is a major cause of inflation. It's impossible for governments to spend their way out of poverty, and the fact is that government spending is a major cause of poverty. So when governments, including our local government, increases taxes on businesses to fund government welfare spending, which this study suggests, all these costs are just passed down to the consumer. Taxes increase on landlords, they just pass that cost on to these renters. Taxes increase on homeowners who are already struggling to feed their families in many cases. It just drives them deeper into poverty. And this study fails to even mention the failed government policies that cause exorbitant housing costs, such as heavy immigration, feeling of homelessness through their safe drug supply, a failed program, their woke attacks on nuclear family and morality, useless and expensive carbon tax drives the cost of everything up, especially food, shelter. And this study, as you'll have noticed, borrows from declarations by the United Nations, the most crooked international government organization known to mankind, and the World Health Organization, heavily influenced by Communist China. And I contend that if the recommendations of the study were implemented, it would just turn us into a greater welfare state than we already are. As Winston Churchill so wisely said, socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, the gospel of envy. Its inherent virtue is the equal sharing of misery. Reading this kind of stuff just makes me angry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And just a question to staff. I heard at the beginning of the presentation, and thank you for the presentation, that it was about a $150,000 grant that got this started. And have we burned through the $150,000?
So we have, but we applied, the board instructed us to apply for the grant. We applied for it. They give you half the money to implement it. And then when you've concluded it and the board receives it and you submit the plan back to them, they give you the remainder of the money. So in theory, if the board did not receive the plan, which I want to repeat that it doesn't commit the board to anything. This is just information and tools but if they didn't receive it, then we're going to be on the hook for the 150 grand.
For the whole 150 or just for half of that?
The whole, we'd have to give back the 75 that we took and then pay the consultant the remaining 75. So the board did instruct us to do this and apply for the grant. And so we did that and then executed that and then bringing the plan forward. So.
Okay, thanks for the clarity.
Director Sinnott.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I agree a lot with what Director Wally has been saying. This strikes me as a plan that sits on a shelf. It sounds like it's got words that mean nothing at the end. I mean, I'm trying to, within the Municipal Services Committee, figure out a way that we can work together to strengthen our small communities. They were declining over all these years. We need to rebuild them. Practical things to me would be get grocery stores in some of these towns. That would reduce some poverty. I mean, this is a bunch of word salad. I agree. It doesn't even address some of the more, even if we accept we're going to use some of this because we have obligations with the funding. The practical things like looking at ourselves for the cost of housing. Like, what are we doing to reduce the cost of the costs that we control, the regulatory costs, and the other costs that we can advocate to reduce? The supplies, the land, the labor, the regulations. I mean, it's very nice to have a place where people can register that they're laborers, but that's not reducing the cost. We're adding more and more costs the more and more we try and create government institutions. I don't know if we can fix it. The horse is out of the barn running down the hill, way down the field. But to me, it doesn't even address some of the things that I'm talking about, which is like our regional areas need help, a lot of help. They've been declining for so many years. If we can just somehow figure out ways to connect and build those areas, the Connected Coast is a huge bonus for that. So congratulations on that. That's not even mentioned in terms of technology and bringing people into remote areas. But that's not everything. So I think there's more work to be done. Thanks.
We'll go back to Director Wally.
Yeah, thank you for Director Sin's comments there. I just wanted to point out that in the Seward Valley, the co-op has opened a little grocery store. It's excellent. It provides for people who, don't have transportation to go to Campbell River whenever they want. And the amazing thing about it is food there is often cheaper than it is in the grocery stores in Campbell River, as amazing as that is. Works really well. So these co-ops are a really good idea.
Director Dahl.
I was wondering if you're going to remember my name or not. I'll start with, for the alternatives for motions that could be made, would the poverty reduction plan be received and not supported at this time work for a motion that we could receive the thing and not be on the hook for $147,000?
Yeah, like as we mentioned, there's no commitment required by us other than to complete the plan. There's no requirement for us to implement or do anything. It's just a tool. So if the board chose or the committee chose, I would suggest, if they don't think there's value in referring the plan to the Community Health Network to try and extract some things out of that and find some direction, that they receive it, and that's it.
So would this be an appropriate time for me to make that motion and then speak to it?
We have a motion to receive yet, so we can do that one first, then go to your resolution.
Well,
So,
no, that's all that would happen. We would vote on receipt and vote on it, and if there's no motion after that, we just move on.
correct. So just, I was reminded that we do have a motion on the floor to receive. So we have,
Okay, well, then I won't make the motion. We'll just let it die.
You
But
don't
I-
need to make a motion, so when we call, just vote on receipt. Yeah.
I think that as the board, we need to be more careful about what we say we want to get funding for. If we're going to waste staff's time doing 112 or 113 page report on something that we are planning on putting on the shelf, that's just a waste of time that could have been used somewhere else. Reality is, I agree with everything pretty much that Director Wally said. And government will never be the one that solves poverty. You look at this report, we spent $147,000, that's about $1,312 a page, to put it on the shelf. That's how government works. It's meetings and reports that don't move the dial anywhere. I watched the slides and, a couple caught my eye. the advocacy for increasing funding for non-market housing. That there's no level of government that can do this. You know, we're just looking at 220 units being built at the North Island College in Courtenay. Their budget is $120 million. The private sector could build that for about $45 million. Not quite a third of the cost, but less than half. So how could the government, who builds things that cost 3 times as much, have any contributions towards poverty reduction? You know, the same with employment. Government involvement in employment only makes operating a business more difficult, and if anything, contributes to poverty. You know, I was just in Japan. Their minimum wage is $10 an hour. Their society is completely different than ours. Their minimum wage is $7 an hour less, but they all own nicer things because their society's taught them to respect what they get, appreciate it, and spend your money wisely. Our society does anything but teach you to spend your money wisely. The other thing is, at $17 an hour, you've got jobs that are just simply not worth that much money, and they sit empty. You know, not every business is a pulp mill that can afford to pay somebody $80,000 to sweep the floor. Small businesses can afford to pay, you know, a lot less than that. So the government imposing these kinds of restrictions actually increases poverty because people are not getting jobs that would have otherwise got a job. So I just think that it comes down to the board making wiser decisions on what they're going to send to staff to look for funding for, because we're just contributing to the waste of government funds.
Okay, we have a speakers list. We have Director Davis and then Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, and I do agree with a few of the points being made. Having said that, I think it is sort of the duty of politicians sometimes to be social engineers, but I'm thinking of it in a different way. It's like, for instance, you know, we have some housing issues in Tassus. So we've been changing the zoning to allow, at least in the trailer park, tiny homes to be brought in. People can use recreational vehicles, of course, with hookups to sewer and water and all that. So we're doing that to try and address that. One of my big concerns here is succession planning for businesses, and these are private businesses where the people are aging out. So we're doing what we can there to try and find new people to potentially purchase these businesses, and we're actually having some success. So we're just doing whatever we can to facilitate those sort of things. Seeking investment in the community, we found an investor to buy one of the major hotels in town. So there's definitely a role for us as politicians, but as far as these massive studies trying to find overarching solutions, I do agree that you can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels and spending a lot of money and not really getting much at the end. I guess one of our big issues is in terms of keeping our rec center open, because people that live in poverty need that. Some of them don't even have showers in their houses, and we've struggled to get grants for that. So in terms of poverty reduction, that's one thing we're still working on, because we know there's a real need for our rec center, and it's unfortunate that the SRD is not willing to help us out with that, although I'm glad to see that Sayward is becoming part of the recreation service there, so that's a good thing. I guess that's about all I had to say right now, but thanks.
Okay, Director Kerr, then I think we have Director Lanyon.
Thank you, Chair. Going to the report, I think, I presume for almost $150,000, there's some good information in the report. But it's like, to me, you order something online and what you get is not what you thought you were getting. And I think most people around the table here would say, this is not what we expected. And I also think that what we got was basically a boilerplate kind of report that probably everybody that goes through this company ends up with something very similar. And, just to say, well, we receive it and they get their money and they go walking off to rip off the next community, that doesn't sit right with me. Is there any way that we can go back and say, look, we want you to look through this, at this through a different lens. And then, maybe we'll receive your report and then maybe we'll pay you. But, like I say, to get some, there's a lot of benign stuff in here. There's a lot of word salad, I think, as somebody said. But, if we're looking for stuff that we can do that makes sense, we need to give them a little bit more direction from the board. It's one thing to say this is coming from the community or through our nonprofits or organizations, but I think the board, I don't know if I don't believe there was board guidance on this report.
There may be opportunity. I think we're under some limited timelines, Meredith, some ability to provide feedback to the consultant.
That is correct. So this is fully paid for at this point, entirely with grant funding, obviously. So there is no additional funds to revise the plan at this stage.
Director Lenyon?
Thanks. That's shocking. Like, where's the back and forth feedback opportunity here? This isn't what I would have asked for. So who laid out the framework for what we were going to be asking for? Please answer.
I guess the framework is provided largely by the grant itself. So, for instance, the priority action areas and what the objective of that grant program is defined by the funders.
So that's the provincial government?
Correct.
Interesting. So, okay. So, there's no chance for us to actually get value out of this then. It's a done deal. There's no more amendments or changes or...
Changes to the plan itself, no. The value comes from how it's implemented. So as a board, it would be up to this table to identify which, if any, initiatives are something that the SRD wants to pursue and fund further. So some of these are things that are already board priorities in other ways. So for instance, active transportation planning is one of the initiatives in here. The housing service and how that functions is in here. So there are certainly pieces of, I would think of sort of broad universal interest, but that would be at the board's discretion of what to carry forward and actually implement from it.
Because the dynamic, thank you. The dynamic I'm seeing is the provincial government says, here, take some money. You can have a plan tailored to your community. We send it off to a consultant who does not tailor it to our community, does not consult the board on what we think our priorities are, comes back and says, either accept this plan or you'll have to pay for it yourself. So it's just force feeding us the provincial government's modus operandi, and it's not ours.
I would say that's partially true. Hopefully there is things within it that you would find some value. Like, I'm not saying every page of it you're finding incredible value to it, but that hopefully there's things within the plan that could have some value. As Director Kerr said, there's a lot of stuff in there. Some maybe you support, some you may not, but the intention would be to refer it to, let's say, the Community Health Network and have them try and extract something that aligns with board priorities.
Okay. I went through it in detail by like by each subpoint in the recommendations. And I found some things that I said, okay, that's good, that's okay, yes, fine, and good. And then that was about half of it. Half of it I found just to be counterproductive or unattainable, totally useless. And so if we leave that in the plan and on our shelf, a few years from now, people are like, oh, we have a plan. And they'll go back to it and say, well, the board received this. Let's revive it.
Kinda, but I don't think, it's not like, it's a bunch of information in a poverty plan that is offered up to you to extract or further the things that you want to. Just because it's a plan doesn't mean it's all our plan that we have to follow. So I think the intent is with some of these things is to find value and extract the things that do align. I mean, it's good that you found some things. You're not saying, I think the whole plan is amazing and we're going to implement everything in there. If there's value within the things, then extract those things out of it. But it's not that the regional board is adopting this plan as following it from A to Z. There's no obligation for that either.
Yeah, but it's like cooking pancakes with just flour. Like, I mean, if you're going to have a plan, you got to have all the ingredients in place. So I don't want this on a shelf that someone else in the future is going to refer to. I mean, we're not implementing it, but does receiving it have the effect of putting it on the menu for later adoption? Because I don't want that.
No. Again, it's a plan that we're funded for. We apply for a grant. There's parameters to do it. We exercise that. We bring it forward, hoping that there's some value to the board, but just receiving it doesn't make it part of like our strategic priorities or like, no. It's just a tool that will sit there over time. I imagine it will disintegrate. There'll be things that will just age out of it. So nobody's going to be pulling this thing 5 or 10 years out and say doing this because a lot of those items would just age out. So if a future board wanted to, maybe they could update it or modify it, but there's no obligation though.
Just for my understanding too, so we know what to ask for the next time something like this comes along. What, like how many back and forths did our staff here have with the consultant during the process? And how long did that take?
Well, certainly we were involved in the entire process. What is in here, though, I want to stress, comes from our consultation with the public. So yes, there are kind of understood kind of best practices in the realm of poverty reduction that we do see reflected here. But most of the initiatives and the things that are in there comes from identified issues and requests from the people that are already directly working with in poverty reduction or from community leaders in like nonprofit societies like the housing societies or the seniors groups and other people that work in community. So it does very much reflect what we heard from the public. So I don't want to reduce it to, I think it would be incorrect to say that it is from our consultant explicitly. I don't think that's fully accurate. But it is, one thing I also wanted to add is that part of what we do is that, as I said, because it's funded by the province, it's grant funded, it also does bolster our competitiveness for future grants. When we apply for instance, housing, we know that there are things that if it's in this plan, we can say this is identified as a priority within our poverty reduction plan. So when we're seeking future funding for that thing, it's something that we can point to say that that is part of a strategy that comes from the community. So that's one of the sort of latent benefits of having a regional strategy like this.
Okay, and so like, if I'm thinking poverty, it's an economics issue, not a social worker issue as much as it is an economics one. Were any economists consulted?
We certainly did meet with local groups that work with economic development. So chambers of commerce, employers, the North Island Employment Foundation Society. There's a number of others. Like I said, there's over 100 different people, not even counting direct outreach to like First Nations, and but certainly working with both school districts in our region as well as North Island College on training opportunities and ways that we can encourage people to have better employment opportunities than they currently have, or to be more employable themselves. So certainly, and one of the initiatives, of course, is the Regional Economic Development Strategy. So it certainly is something that is a primary focus of this plan.
Okay, because, you know, we're seeing a bit of an industry collapse here on the North Island. And it's the loss of paychecks and the spill-off dollars from that get recirculated in the economy are not flowing like they were a few years ago. And so it's actually pushing people who are able-bodied and able to work below the poverty line. And to me, like, the low-hanging fruit is, okay, let's just push those people that just went below the poverty line back up. There's 1 point out of 100 that addresses that. You know, like, it's almost like I saw something in there about, you know, focus on multimodal transportation rather than vehicle efficiency. I'm like, how do you transport logs? How do you transport goods to stores? And how do people typically get their groceries home, right? Like so it's there. This is laced with ideology. I have a problem with that. I do not feel consulted. This is not what I asked for. So, and that's all I'll say. Like I don't want this plan ever referred to again. This is not good.
Thank you. So we have a speakers list again. We have Director Kerr, Director Davis, and Director Mawhinney. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I want to say, you know, right up front, you know, you're kind of in the hot seat, but I mean, this is not on you. This is not on staff. You know, this is on the board for not realizing what was going on here, and for not staying on top of it, really. And I think that's the concern, is that from a board perspective, is that it doesn't happen again. And I understand that's the way that government manipulates councils. I mean, a number of times we get this on council with our studies. It's all based on, whether it's the federal government, provincial government, based on us jumping through certain hoops, and saying, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we promise to do that if you give us the money, and because we want the money. But all this crap that goes along with it, ideology-based stuff, is, I mean, I think we as councils and boards, regional boards, need to push back now. There's been far too much going on, and just swallowing it and saying, yeah, okay, we'll do this. But we're getting into a position where we've swallowed so much that it's seriously time to push back. You know, I agree that this could just sit on a shelf and not do anything about it, but this is a public document. We're not in camera. This is a public document. You know, there's nonprofits that are going to run around saying, this is what the community said, and you're not doing it. You know, it's not, I mean, sure, we don't have to do it, but it gets a life of its own. And so by receiving it, acknowledging it, and condoning it without pushback, we're actually agreeing with them. We're saying, yes, yeah, we that's okay, except we decided that we're not going to do anything about it. I think we got to be more active in our resistance to this, and maybe we have to lead the way, because, you know, there's not a lot of councils, regional district boards that are willing to say, you know, take your $170 and stop it. We don't think this represents reality. You know, or are we going to get paid off, you know, so that we puts us in a weak position? I mean, really, I mean, if we don't believe in something, we don't receive it. That's how I feel. I mean, otherwise we're hypocrites. We're saying, yeah, we don't believe it, but we'll take your money. And pretend that we believe in it, but we don't. So, and I mean, I think every community in this country, you know, maybe in the continent, I don't know, but in this country is doing the same kind of thing right now. And they've been doing it for a long time, because we're sucking at the same cow, you know. But, you know, it's got to end. And it's got to end by us being real and not saying, you this is good. We're going to swallow this crap that you're stuffing down our throats. And, but just give us some money and we're going to go on and pretend it didn't happen. But it's happening. It's happening every day. Sorry, that's my rant.
Okay, I do have a speakers list, but is there any questions for Director Kerr before we go back to the speakers list?
If I can, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment, and I'm not disputing or arguing. I just want to make a point to what Director Lanyon said. I don't want to hear it referred to again. Often we will, the province, the feds, whoever it is that funds this stuff, they will use these as tools for funding for something else. So let's say there's something available for economic development. They'll say, unless you have this included, I'm just making this up, in a poverty reduction plan, you have identified this, you're not eligible. So that is often part of the process that they'll use. And so happy to not refer to it again, just understand sometimes it can come with some secondary consequences to it.
Were you recommending, Director Kerr, that we don't receive the document, don't receive the report?
I'd go beyond not receiving it. I'd go back and say, we want it done the way we want it. What are
Right, the motion on the-
expectations
on the floor.
and get a report, pardon?
Concerning the motion on the floor.
I don't know, it's a matter of, whether we feel that it's worth, the 170 or the 100 and whatever, $150,000 is, that's a lot of
Yeah.
coin. But
If you were recommending we don't receive it, I was going to say I agreed with you.
yeah, I wouldn't, I'm not going to vote for receiving it, truthfully, myself.
Let's go back to the speakers list. I have,
I wanted to address Director Kerr.
okay,
Thank you.
Kerr.
I think I have a follow-up policy, an executive limitation policy that would address this if we receive it. That wouldn't permit use by the CAO to direct anything under this plan without further board consent. So that's going to be my solution if we receive it.
Any more discussion on Councillor Kerr's points? Councillor Kerr, you want to follow up? And then we have Director Lott. Okay, we have a speakers list. Let me go through this. We have Director Davies, Mawhinney, Director Lanyon, Director Wally. Right now, we're responding. I'm allowing directors to respond directly to Director Kerr on his comments that he made. And if someone wants to follow up on that, that's great. So,
Mr. Chair, check me off there. My comment was to Director Kerr.
yeah.
Move me off your other list.
Okay. So we're just responding to Director Kerr. He made several points. I just want to make sure we all understand clearly what we want to do. So anybody else want to respond to Director Kerr in the comments? Director Lott, you're next.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this question. Is that I believe when a council or a board receives a report for information that doesn't constitute an endorsement of that doesn't constitute an ownership of it, it doesn't require the board or council to action it. It simply is information that's provided to us as decision makers to help us with the decision-making process. And for us to consider not to accept this and to incur another 100 and whatever debt because we have some aversion to whatever the results of the report is, I think is financially irresponsible. And if I was a taxpayer, I'd be outraged by that position. You can receive this information to help you make decisions pertaining to this issue. You don't own it. You don't have to recognize it as being adopted, as by the board, and you don't have to implement it. You don't have to put any actions in it. But I tell you, as a decision maker on this board, unfortunately, I didn't have the time to read this whole report. I'm going to read it. I'm going to see if there's anything in there that's that could be helpful in this issue, because even though I'm a free enterpriser and I believe that free enterprise is the best economic system and it's proven itself historically to raise more people out of poverty globally than any other economic model that we've seen, I still believe that we need to be a compassionate society. And if we're not going to be a compassionate society, then we're just going to be unbridled free enterprisers, and we're not going to take care of people that can't function within that model. I don't want to live in that society. That's that's an inhumane society to be in. You have the winners and they have a whole pile of losers. So we've got to take care of those people that can't take care of themselves. We're called to take care of those people that can't take care of themselves. We can't ignore them. And we can't ignore our responsibilities. So, of course, I'm going to receive this for information. I'm going to look for other sources of information. I'm not going to burn any books or turn any ideas off or prevent people from expressing themselves. I want to hear a plurality of opinions when I make a public policy decision. And if this document to me is just simply information to help me make a decision about something, I'm not voting to adopt this thing or to action anything out of it. I simply want to be able to get information that may be able to help us to provide something for people who need to be provided for that cost us anything or may not or be something that we can provide within our framework that doesn't burden us. But to simply say that we object to it in terms of its content and the ideology behind it, and to ask the taxpayer to incur $140,000, $50,000 debt at the board level because we're offended by it, I think it's irresponsible. So I wouldn't be supporting any proposal that doesn't accept this or receive this for information, because I just don't want to be in a position where we're paying the bill, and I don't believe that it holds us to any action in the future or shows any endorsement at all, just simply providing information for board to make informed decisions. And there's other sources of information too. So that's my thought on that. And going back to the ideology, I believe in free enterprise because I think that's the economic model that's proven itself historically to raise more people out of poverty than anything else. But I'm not in support of a non-compassionate society that doesn't take care of people that can't function with that system, because we're called to take care of those folks. Thank you very much.
We would, yeah.
Director Kerr, you had your hand up. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I think bringing in non-compassion and linking it to any side here is truthfully insulting. Sorry, could you say that again? I said linking non-compassion to any stand on this discussion is insulting. I don't think there was any consideration, non-compassion. In fact, I think there's more compassion in helping people. Well, I know you do, but I mean, I think that's a slippery slope that you've gone down. And I think, my intent on this is not to tell the writers of this article, of this study, what to write. It's to give them a different lens. And I think they have the exact wrong lens that they're looking through. Certainly, they've done the bulk of the work. The work is the outreach, the discussions, the bulk of their, where they've gone wrong is when they brought all that information back and ran it through their template back in the office and came up with what they probably pump out to every organization, which is beholding to our federal and provincial governments right now. And I think that's what we're swallowing with all the good information. I believe there's lots of good information in this, but the conclusions are predictated by our senior governments. And that's what I object to, and that's what I wish to to push back on. And I don't think that's going to cost $150,000 for them to correct that.
No, but just, again, you have to think of this in terms of like the province puts out a funding opportunity to do a poverty reduction plan, and then they give you parameters. And you need to fulfill those parameters in there. So you take that, there's nothing prohibiting, let's say, if we want to extract some value or input in it. If, let's say, the board received this, we're able to claim our $150,000. There's nothing preventing the board then from diving into it itself. Like, we own that. It's a poverty reduction plan that on our own nickel and time, there's nothing preventing us from continuing on with it. Like, it's a document that we own. So I don't think we have, because the consultant's going to check the boxes of the plan and the requirements of the plan and the community consultation with, as Meredith said, over the 100+ folks. It is what it is. There's some good things in there, some low value things, maybe there's some useless things in there. But if you wanted to continue and extract value out of it, we own it. You can continue to work and accept and create a document on our own that you're happy with. There's who's going to stop us from doing that? It's ours. So if you think there's value to be gained from continuing on this, I don't think the path is going back to the consultant and saying, you didn't do this, that, and that. They're just going to give us an argument that, look, we fulfilled the requirements of what the grant said. But again, I don't believe there's anything stopping us from taking the document ourselves and, again, referring it to the committee, continuing this board, and steering it in a direction that the board wants.
Director Lott.
Through the chair to the CAO, just for clarification, is that if we receive this document for information, does that bind the board to endorsing this and requiring to implement it and then have action items out of it?
No, there's no requirement for implementation. Doesn't commit us to anything. No, that to me is more perception than anything. But perception can be, as Director Kerr said, community groups, their perception is that we've endorsed or received it, but
we're not endorsing it by receiving it.
no, technically speaking, we're not, right?
We're simply receiving it for information.
Yes.
We don't own it. We're not obligated to.
We're not obligated. We own it. It's ours.
Yep.
It's a tool. It's a document we have, but we're not obligated or committed to anything within it.
That clarifies it for me. Thank you, sir.
Director Lanyon.
Okay. Just need guidance, probably from CAO. On the parts that we can agree are valuable, I want to keep. How hard is it for us to take this template and strip out the things that actually appear to work the opposite direction?
Well, here's my theory behind that is what we typically do. It's not like every plan or document we get is contained with 100% incredible value out of it. We do these things and we try and find some value. So in my mind, when I included options was, let's receive it. There's, I think we can agree there's some good things within it that have some value. Refer it to an appropriate committee and then try and refine and extract the things out of that we find value and ignore the rest. I mean, there's no chance, even if the board loved the majority of the document, there's no way you're going to implement or commit to everything within it. So try and find value, send it to a group that has a focus on this type of thing, like the Community Health Network, and extract what you want and ignore the rest. Like, for example, I'll take a low-hanging piece of fruit. And we've internally talked about this. We have adjusted the document to not, for lack of a better term, highlight universal income. That's nowhere on this board's interest level or anything that we have the ability to further. So there's no way I'm going to speak on behalf of the group, that we're going to push forward on universal income in the regional district through this. That's part of the document. If you loved every other aspect of the document, in theory, we still wouldn't do that. We would just ignore it. We wouldn't action it. So it would just live in there. But it's not saying that you endorse, because it says universal income in there and you've received the document, you're a big proponent of universal income. You just do nothing with it. I think that would be normal in anything we received. It's unlikely you're going to love everything that's in any plan.
Okay, this like what I'm getting from this is a combination of provincial government direction given to us in some degree as a starting point in the parameters, and then it is community feedback assembled into action points. This isn't a plan, it's just community feedback and provincial government directives. If it was a plan, then it would have had our involvement. It has not. So this isn't a plan. This really is just a report.
Report and tools, I would agree with that. Now, if the board, let's say, wanted to implement a plan, again, I would say refer it, what would make sense to me is the community health network, extract what you want out of that and create a plan if that's your will. But yeah, there's tools and information is what it is. Maybe the plan is, I mean, I think we called it a plan because that's what the grant called it, but you can create your own plan and use this as tools and information.
This is weird to me. Like I feel like there should be an intuitive sense within the management to say, I should probably run this in its draft form past the directors and just see if we're on the right direction here. So
At times, yes, but again, when you're fulfilling the terms of a grant that says you got to do X, Y, and Z, that's what you have to do, and it's information. Again, maybe we're getting caught up in semantics of the word plan. It's not a plan that the board has to adopt and follow, but it's information and tools.
But internally, it's somewhat of a misuse of Meredith's time and whoever else was involved on this project. Like, we have other objectives, and if time is being used in a way that is totally wasted like this, it is, then I don't like that. Like we want a more refined organization that is focused on our strategic objectives, not just getting grants and paying wages. Like, we want forward motion on things. So that's a bit of a criticism because, you know, I don't think the status quo in terms of how things are conducted here over the last 15 years is the same now. And I think we need to change a pace in terms of how we're approaching this stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. However, when we bring forward this in the grant opportunity and the parameters around it, I mean, they are and were what they were. So maybe there wasn't enough discussion about what is involved in this, what is it going to look like. We can do a better job of presenting that so the board has more disclosure on those things. But again, there's a lot of these things are very prescriptive, and we need to follow them in order to receive the funding for them. And that becomes part of the request for proposal and direction to the consultant of that's what you're going to do.
Director Kerr. I'll explain it again. We're rebutting Councillor Kerr's comments made. We'll return to the speakers list as soon as we're finished rebuttals to what Councillor Kerr initially said. You're still on the speakers list. The speakers list, when we're finished with this, is Director Davis, Director Mawhinney, and Director Lanyon.
I already got mine, sorry. I didn't know we were done with Kerr.
Okay.
My apologies.
So to rebut the rebut,
Thank you, Chair. And I still think this is a Trojan horse. I think, and I'm going to use universal income as the example. When in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, senior government comes and decides on their own that they're going to impose universal income on the country, they're going to say all the communities have got this in their plans. And indeed we do, you know, because they've snuck these you know, and you can go through the little things that they've embedded in here, you know, and it's all ideology based. But they're going to come back to haunt you at some point because, yes, we did. We accepted that, and it does say in that plan that we did. And it's also embedded in the community's mind that, yes, we did. We didn't push back and say, this is bullshit. We're not going to accept this, which we should be doing, but we're not. We're receiving it, you know, we're not reacting to it. And that's, to me, it's a philosophy. You know, it may be expensive, it may not be, I don't know. But I think you got to push back. You can't let them sneak this kind of stuff in the back door.
Okay, I think there's more to come on that later. We're going to have one more comment on rebuttals, and then we're going to go back to the speakers list. I think we've beat this to a pulp. Director Lott.
I just want to return to our definition again. Councillor Kerr, I think, is muddying the waters here by saying that if this board receives this report for information, we consented to it, we've adopted to it, and it's our plan. None of that is true. We simply received this document for information, and we're not beholden to any of the items within there. We haven't endorsed any of the items that are in there. We haven't adopted any of them. We're not planning an action plan from it. People can make references to it if they want, but it is a report that's been provided to this board to help make some decisions on this issue moving forward. We don't have ownership of it in terms of we've adopted it and we've endorsed all the concepts that are in there and that we're planning on actioning them. That's not correct. We're simply receiving a document for information that we've requested to have made for us so that we can help make decisions on this issue moving forward. And I think that going back to it and saying that we've adopted the principles in there is incorrect, and that we shouldn't be considering that in decision making. We should simply be looking at this and saying, we've asked for this report. The board endorsed it. We've directed staff to go forward and to make it. They provide it for us. Now we've got a report. And if we don't receive it, we're going to be on the hook for the cost of it. That's just because we're concerned about elements that are in there that we want to see in there, or if you feel there's some ideological mischief going on in there, that doesn't make any sense to me. And the argument that we own it is not an argument that's supportable, because it's not the fact. We do not own this. We're simply receiving a report for information to help us make decisions moving forward. We don't, I can't stress more. We haven't endorsed it. We haven't approved it. We're not looking at any actions items. We're not held accountable for it. We're simply receiving a document for information. So I don't know why we're going down this path. To me, it's simple. Receive it. Get your money, decide what you want to do with it, like the CEO has suggested, move it to somebody that might find some value in it, bring it back, and then we can adopt it as our plan if we want that to be our plan. This is simply a report. Thank you.
Well, let's go through the speakers
The
list.
amendment simply is that we add to receipt for information only, period.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Well, no, we already have a motion on the floor. Sorry.
It's an amendment to
And, okay, we have an amendment to the motion. Is it,
To receive for information only.
okay, Director Lott seconds that.
I'm speaking to my amendment. That just
Use your microphone.
For everybody. No, I have the right to speak. Darn that thing. Why don't we make these automatic? Yeah, so the amendment simply clarifies the discussion that is for information only. Shouldn't be any problem with it.
Okay, let's go back to the speakers list. We have Director Davis and Director Mulwini.
On the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you. Okay, well, we're just receiving, right? So, okay, let's do the
No,
amendment.
we're debating the amendment.
Yeah.
Motion to receive.
Yeah,
To add the
got
words
it.
for information purposes.
Yeah,
So I think you have to take the vote on this.
Yes. yes, so, yes, I agree. So we're gonna vote on the amendment. All in favor? Okay,
I'm sorry, can we hear the amendment again?
The amendment is to receive the document for information only.
Does that mean that we can't bring up other motions after?
Of course we can. And for clarity, if anyone's thinking, this amendment motion, in my mind, wouldn't prohibit us from receiving the funding for the document. Because it is for information only, the board is not obligated or committed to implement anything within this.
Thanks for that clarification.
Director Mulwini.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm interested in Director Wally's motion because in the comments that I've been waiting to say, I actually also had an amendment to the receipt motion, and I wasn't sure if we were allowed to amend receipt motions, but it seems we are. So I'm just going to say that what I felt like would be a great motion would be to move receipt of the Poverty Reduction Plan report and add that word report in there so that we're not identifying it as a plan. And also include in it that we do not support it at this time. That seems to be one of the options that were in the staff report outlining the Poverty Reduction Plan, and I think that maybe combining those two would clarify the board's position on the Poverty Reduction Plan report. So I would love to amend Director Wally's amendment, but I'm not sure we're allowed to do that.
In my mind, it would be cleaner to discuss Director Wally's amendment, have a vote on that, and if you want a second motion, the intent of having options, you can move 1, 2, none, all of them. I would introduce the second motion if that's your will.
Director Lanyon.
Okay, so the first page of the this document says Strathcona Regional District Draft Poverty Reduction Plan. When we receive it, will it retain that draft stamp, or is that going to get removed?
Well, it'll get removed, yeah.
It's still in draft. We've just received the draft. We haven't approved it as non-draft.
Well, that's part of, what your ability, I guess, to add comment is more in the structure, not the context of it. And again, I know that's frustrating to you, but it's following the parameters of the grant, that it's a community-driven input plan, if you will, report. So yes, it's draft, but you do have very limited ability to change it based on the parameters of what the plan was. It wasn't a plan that required, input from the board. It's, as you can see, there's a lot of community involvement in it, and that's where the context of the plan is coming from. So, look, it's a draft plan. Again, if we're talking, we've got a number of things on the table. If it's in support of receiving the funding for it, receive the plan as information, and then we can clear the decks on that. If you want to do something else with it, have another motion, is that you don't support it, you want to refer it, you want to create Plan B and take what we have and delete a whole bunch of it, do that as well. But I would suggest moving on with some form of receipt of it, and then deciding what, if anything, you want to do to follow up on it. If you receive it as information only, I think that's pretty clear. It removes the draft, you receive it, it's clear you're receiving it for information only. Again, there's no obligation or commitment. I would suggest following that path and then give further instruction on what you want done with it, if anything.
Okay, so everyone, let's call the question on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It's carried. Now the original motion as amended. Anybody? Oh, Director Mulwini.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the list, finally. I think really when I was looking at the strategic, at this poverty reduction plan report, to me, it feels like the things that are important to our board, we've already really identified within our strategic priorities. And we talk about affordability and housing diversity for residents of all ages. We talk about considering transportation initiatives that move people and goods and services, and initiatives to develop robust and diverse economic conditions within our communities. So I actually feel like our strategic priorities are stronger, clearer, and really speak to some of these areas that are identified in the poverty reduction plan. And I don't think that these many points that are here are we necessarily want to go into further lengthy conversations and discuss stripping out what we do and don't agree on as a board. I think that would be a fairly onerous and time-consuming exercise, and we've spent a lot of time constructing our strategic priorities, which really address the key areas that we think are important within this plan, without this plan. So I'm not sure that the plan is actually anything but a bit of a distraction and a lot of extra points of contention if we decide to keep discussing it in further meetings. Thanks.
So, let's call a question. All in favor of the original motion as amended?
Which is receipt as information.
Information only. Director Sinnott, Director Lott, Director Mawhinney, Director Lanyon, and Director Wally. Opposed? Opposed? Director Kerr opposed? Okay,
That's only one opposed then.
one opposed. Okay.
I have subsequent motions I proposed. And I'm not sure if this is the right form, if they move to the SRD regular agenda, and I'd like Mr. Yates, I sent them over to Edith, so maybe he can tell me if this is the right place?
I would say it's the right place because
Yeah.
we are finished with, we received it for information only. We're done with it. So if there's any further motions, I would say now's the time.
Okay, thank you. Actually, in my second one, I did have a tiny little typo, but that's okay. I was drafting them as I was sitting here. So do you want me to read it out?
Please.
Okay, so the first motion is to address the issue with respect to this plan in particular. The second motion is to address the issue of further grants going forward for plans. So this one says, whereas the CAO of the SRD directs the appropriate planning, resource allocation, operational control of the SRD, and whereas the CAO of the SRD provides reporting functions to the board and government agencies, including having the discretion to use various plans to guide the operations of the SRD. And whereas the SRD board has expressed concerns that the poverty reduction plan received does not reflect the priorities nor sets out actions that the SRD board would support in terms of resources. Accordingly, the CAO shall not permit actions that are set out in the poverty reduction plan without providing to the board either a motion for approval to move forward with an action set out in the plan, the CAO's reasonable interpretation how a proposed action of the plan align with the board's stated strategic priorities and how the CAO proposes to action the recommendations, or a summary for board approval of actions under the plan together with any actions that is to be added that the CAO proposes to action. In other words, if there's 10 highlights that the CAO wants to provide, you can provide it to us, we can approve it, and then we put this thing behind us. So that's my motion there.
Is there a second? Okay, Director Kerr seconds.
Second.
And discussion?
I only raise this because I think there was some discussion that perhaps public entities or not-for-profits would put pressure on the SRD, and this clearly gives the CAO some guidelines in terms of response of how to move forward.
So from my perspective, what I would typically do, instead of making majority of these judgments independently, I would refer the report to a committee of the board to discuss, of which there are staff, there's elected officials on, and that group provide a recommendation, instead of myself, to this board of what they think there's value and focus on. That this to me reflects something like that, but it's unlikely I'm going to independently extract things out of this report and bring it back to the board and say, you should do this, that, and the other. It's typically for a subcommittee of the board to do that.
I think the concern that I heard expressed at the board level was that this could generate actions on behalf of staff. We don't control staff, you do. So all we can do is say what you have to do for us. Otherwise, if we're
yeah.
doing it, it's fine.
Right, no, I get it, and I appreciate that. And at the same time, so I then would typically, if anything, redelegate it to the committee. However, if this committee or board doesn't redelegate that or delegate that to what only makes sense to me, the Community Health Network, I'm not gonna extract much of anything and bring that forward. So, based on the discussion I've heard. So, if any of that doesn't make sense, what I'm trying to say is, if you think there's any value in anything and you want to, within this report, and you want to extract something, or you want to create a real plan 2.0 that gives you the ability to get your hands in there, then refer it to the Community Health Network and either extract items or create report plan 2.0 of which you want out of it.
Director Wally? Use your mic. Good. You're ahead of me.
It'd be my preference in the short term that we just don't make any further motions. We just let this thing die, and in the future, when we're either in municipalities, services committee or electoral committees, if we come up with a smart idea, we can bring it forward to the board in accordance with our strategic priorities. Otherwise, just let it die and it's dead.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. Director Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. And I do agree with Mr. Leach that I think it's chicken and egg. And that would probably be the next step. But today, I feel more comfortable with this motion than a future Community Health Network board.
Okay, so any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? No opposed, carried. So, just,
I have a second motion.
oh, okay.
Oh, I'm busy over here typing up motions.
I saw you typing.
This is to deal with Director Lanyon's concern about going forward with grant applications. So whereas the CEO of the SRD directs the appropriate planning, resource allocation, operational control of the SRD, according to the CAO shall not bring forward a grant application without setting how the proposed grant meets the stated strategic priorities of the board, shall not direct institutional planning that is not consistent with the mission. So these are conjunctive. So at the point, the CEO shall not, so these are conjunctive. Bring forward, shall not direct institutional planning that is not consistent with the mission vision of the SRD, shall not allow grants to be applied for in the development of plans for the SRD without adequately addressing the expected outcome of the plan, its impact on SRD resources, the use to which the plan could be made by the SRD or the public, and its future impact on the SRD. And I think that's the last clause that's the most relevant to the concerns of Councillor Lanyon. But I'm not so wedded on number 2, but it's just basically we want to make sure that when plans are coming forward, it's consistent with our strategic planning and or we understand the implications of adopting these plans.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Sinnott, is seconded by Director Dahl. Any further discussion?
I think this is probably happening anyway. This is just a very specific stated concern because it's happened now with this particular plan that's just like, whoa, what does this mean to us? That I think just a really short summary when these grants are being provided to us, bang, bang, bang. This is how it fits in those 3 boxes or some of the boxes. That's what I'm looking for.
We have Director Lanyon and Director Kerr.
Sure, I appreciate this motion, and I think we should just have it in place. I'm not sure that there's anything management could have done to give us a heads up, because sometimes you don't understand the full implications of a grant necessarily and what the template starting point is until you say yes. So I think there may still be instances that sneak through. And so I would just urge management and staff, take the temperature of the room and think about what the final product should be, or it's going to be embarrassing, and you're going to get some lashings.
Director Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. And I think this has been an education moment for the board. And I think really the board should be doing this before, as soon as a grant proposal is brought, the board should be saying, does this meet our strategic plan, and discuss it. And so I think, first of all, we slipped up, and this is the way it's been done in the past. So, I mean, it's really easy, I mean, for staff not to assume that we're going to react to it if we've always, for how many years, let it, this happen. So I think it's a check, but I think that really the onus comes back to the board to make sure, just as much as our CAO.
Any further discussion? Should we wait for Director Wally, or do you want to vote now? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I just want to give you a little history of some of the grants in the province and how they work. You know you're old when you can give a history that goes back 30 years. But when the gas tax started, the federal and provincial government put quite a pile of money together, and the first draw on that, Metro Vancouver, Kamloops, Kelowna, Prince George, took up all of that grant money, and they had very large sewer projects, and they were significant. The province received a lot of blowback from that. And what happened then is the province said, okay, well, policy is the grants now are maxed at, I think it's $4 million. And we're going to toss this over to UBCM and let them manage it. And it's almost like throw a bone in the pit and let them all fight for it. And then it went to the point where saying, okay, well, in order to receive gas tax money or community works money, you have to have a capital asset management plan. So then everybody scrambled around and got an asset management plan. And if you didn't get the money, because you didn't put in a good grant application. And I see the province telling regional districts that you need this plan, and they encourage this plan with significant money, saying then they're going to come up with a bunch of grant things to help people out of poverty, help things go along. And if you don't have a good plan and you don't make a good application, you're not going to get the money. And it's not going to be the province's fault. They're going to dish that out onto the regional districts. So that's my prediction. Mark that down. It's coming. Okay. Item number 2, Community Works Gas Tax Fund Allocation. And, okay, thank you. The receipt. Second. Director Mawhinney seconds it.
So, Mr. Chair, Mike will introduce the gas tax fund allocation, but this board, there's a lot of new members on it. This has been an allocation policy of the board bylaw for some time. I'm sure there's certain directors are unaware of it. There was a motion to bring this and the cost allocation formula forward. So Michael introduced this, and
He's been waiting a long time to do this.
Yeah, thanks. We kept this presentation at a pretty high level, given the audience. The gas tax has been around for quite a while. So the presentation today is going to cover what it is, how we allocate it, what the funds can be spent on, and highlight any of the 2024 changes. So there's quite a few attachments that were sent out. So a lot of this information will be included in there. So just a brief history on the gas tax. I won't read all these points, but it started in 2025, and 2020, in 2011 was when it became a stable source of federal funding. So it's a very unique program in that sense. It's the one funding that you don't have to scramble for with applications every year. It's just given. Originally, when this was set out, it was centered around green infrastructure. So it had to be new infrastructure that's really good for the environment. In 2024, it was a significant change with the discussion of the infrastructure deficit. So ever since then, that's really what the gas tax has been aimed at, is for all the municipalities to have a stable source of funding to renew and renew all their infrastructure. And then recently, it just came to 2024 is the new agreement. It's for 10 years to 2034. And so they also increased the amount a bit. The chair spoke a bit about this when it was when it first came out. The gas tax fund itself is divvied up into three parts. So half of it goes to the community works funds. 39% of it goes to the strategic priority funds, which is a program that comes. They have an intake every couple of years, and it's project specific, but it acts extremely similar to the community works funds. And then the Metro Vancouver Regional Fund is the final 11% of it. As far as the community works funds pot, it's the 2.3 billion now a year. British Columbia gets 280 million, and that'll boil down to the Strathcona Regional District. We get so we get 543,000. So that's figured out by taking a base amount, and then everything else is allocated on the population of. For the regional district, everything outside a incorporated area. And then you see the table below for the individual allocations for the area. So we have a 10,000 population. The First Nations are included the amount as far as the population, but they don't actually have access to the gas tax funds itself. They have alternative forms of funding. So, and then that population of the 1719 would be throughout the individual areas. So that's how the province allocates it to the board. Once the board have it, we've traditionally allocated it to the regional districts based on their individual populations, but there's no mandate on how that's done. So there's recent polls that some municipalities or some regional districts keep it all together in one pool and allocate it project by project basis. Some just split it evenly between their electoral areas, and some have a base amount or a combination of that formula. So as far as funding levels, the 2019 and the 2021 was a doubling of the fund. So in 2019, there was just a surplus of gas tax, and they put that in, and then 2021 was some COVID stimulus to try and boost some local spending. So last year, we had a total of 529,000. With the new agreement, they increased it, so we're going up about 2.6%, and then we have a forecast for the next 5 years. So if you do the math for that, it's about 1% a year increase to the overall fund. So as far as what can be spent on, it's strictly associated with a tangible capital infrastructure. So you're allowed to do planning, design fees, renovations, and some debt financing costs. It's also for to increase your planning capacity as it relates to capital infrastructure. So you could do capital investment plans, housing management or housing needs assessments, and asset management plans. So all projects will have to fit into one of the eligible product categories, and I won't read through them, but they're just traditional infrastructure that you would expect. I have a star there beside the capacity building, and that's for the one set of operations for developing your asset management and your capital investment plans. Just to highlight, community energy systems is a bit unique. As the next slide will show, you could give money to non-government entities, but for the community energy systems, it's the catch-all category for any retrofits, what we commonly deal with. So as far as heat pumps and everything of that nature, that's the one area where it has to be a government-owned facility. Regional districts have some leeway if we have a service around it. So, for example, we have some community halls that we don't own, but because we have a long-standing service, we pay the electrical bill. Everything else, heat pumps and whatnot, become eligible. And then resilience is one of the new categories we'll talk about briefly ahead, but that's for your flood mitigation, dams, dikes, geotechnical engineering, and that kind of thing. So as far as the eligibility guidelines, again, there's some great testing documents put out by UBCM if you ever want to see what's eligible. So as far as the one thing, it has to be for public use. And so point one, I just want to highlight, it has to be a project primarily is the key word in there. So you have a lot of projects, for example, that could be perhaps given to a third party. And one of the side benefits of that would be it's available and open to the public. If you can imagine, like a private golf course or something, it makes a playground that's available for a couple weeks out of the year. It would primarily be for the benefit of the golf course, so it would not be eligible for that type of thing. As far as point two, nothing limited by private membership, and what you have to be careful there is anytime you have payment from the public to a non-government entity, it could get restricted around there. So you have example for like a government-owned pool is fine, that has a fee, but if you have a private, a non-government entity charging fees and whatnot, it could go against the eligibility guidelines. And I should point out too that all these have to be taken into account. There's no one consideration that makes that public or not. It's up for the board to decide if it overall meets a plan in case some of these conflict with anything. And the third point, again, it just goes back to the last slide where it has to be a public service that's traditionally provided by the government. And as far as the benefit is the next category, and UBCM points out in their literature that they don't define public use or what a benefit actually is. It's up for the board to make that determination. But it does essentially have to be tangible. It should be clearly demonstrable how the public would benefit from any project. And the second point is it has to benefit a sufficiently large segment of the public or community. And again, they don't define what sufficiently large is, so that would be up to the board to make that determination. As far as what is ineligible, you could read the list there. I'll just point the third bullet point down is the administrative buildings because a lot of the projects can take place in a multi-use facility. Anytime there's an administration component, you have to be kind of careful of how if that would benefit from the project at all, it could not be eligible. So City Hall is a good example, like water works and everything is eligible under the community works funds, but any of the public work administration or anything associated with would not be eligible. As far as ineligible expenditures, the one that we commonly run up against is small equipment purchases. So a good example there is when you're redoing perhaps at a community center, if you consider a kitchen, anything attached to the building would be an eligible project. So as far as like countertops, flooring, ceiling work and air lighting, any of that. But when you get to fridges and stoves or any of the tables, that would not be considered eligible. And everything else should be self-explanatory. As far as the ineligible costs, the one we commonly get is the overhead and administration. So if there's any project management fees or anything being charged by the beneficiary, that could be not eligible. They do have certain avenues you can go if you have to hire extra staff or anything else, but you have to get pre-approval on that. So generally, you don't see a lot of administration getting charged. And the one issue for a regional district is actually the repairs and maintenance. If you help build a project, for example, and you don't own it and you don't have a service around it, as everybody knows, infrastructure commonly breaks in the first year and the last year of operation. So if you do give an asset and then it breaks, for a regional district, we would actually have no way to repair or maintain it. So that would probably come out of your EA administration budget or something if that was the case. So something you got to watch. And just to highlight some of the changes changes for 2024 agreement. Fire trucks as a standalone project was big. As you can imagine, there's a lot of demand for fire trucks. In the old agreement, you actually had to build a new fire hall, and then they would allow you to buy a fire truck. But this is the one kind of infrastructure that's not attached to anything that rolls around that you could now get. The other big one too for us is the design and feasibility studies. As you can imagine, if you spend community works funds to do a detailed design for infrastructure and that project doesn't go ahead, you would no longer have a tangible asset. And so the detailed design work and all those costs would suddenly be no longer eligible for any funding. So anytime there's a non-eligibility, you have to move funding from one project to the other. And with, the way we allocate it here to individual electoral areas, that could be a problem if one electoral area has to reallocate and they don't have any other source of funding, then they'd have to pay it back to into the fund. And because that could prevent the, the entire board from getting the whole allotment. I'll take a second to talk about this one. So this is the one area this year where they've kind of cracked down for something we do a lot of is give money to the non-government owned assets. So the first point is they want a 5-year holding limit for the funds because they've noted a lot of communities are accumulating these funds and not spending them. But there is variance if it's included in a long-term plan. So it might be the case where we do reports and we have a lot of unallocated fund. We might want to look at doing some future allocations because those could always be changed later. But just for the optics of it, to have these funds actually allocated to water or sewer projects or something in the future, because that could always be reallocated. Oh, sorry, this slide. The second point down is a big one too. They now want, anytime you're sponsoring a non-government owned project, to actually change up the board resolution so it includes 3 things. The first thing is the project, the board should acknowledge that the project is a regional priority and part of a long-term capital investment plan. So what that's saying is it should be a core infrastructure for your organization. Again, the whole plan now since 2014 is to attack the infrastructure deficit. So if it's not your infrastructure and you're attacking a third party's infrastructure deficit, they really want the board to consider that. The second point is that they want you to list that or state that you're not prioritizing a non-government owned asset over one of your own. So you can imagine there, if you deplete your community works funds and then need your own infrastructure needs renewal, they want you to consider that. And the third point is that the project should be supported by asset management planning. And I translate that into if you're not adding to your own infrastructure plan, you should somehow plan for this asset to be renewed. Because I just imagine if you have various community groups looking for new projects that they can't afford to implement themselves in 20 years, 30 years, when that same asset needs to be replacing, chances are it could, again, be in the same, you would have essentially increased your infrastructure deficit at that point. So they're saying that anything you build with these funds, you should have a plan to renew it when the time comes and maintain it. The other part of the changes were less impactful, but anyone receiving over $400,000 a year like we do, they want at least one form of communication. This is why we've actually in the financial plan have a special schedule now, because that would count as a communication. And then we've talked with Elaine in the advertising to do some news releases anytime we're doing any significant projects. And they also have a signage recommendation. It's not mandatory, but they're looking for that anything over $100,000 to put out a public sign and then keep it up there for 6 months after the project's complete, just acknowledging the federal government's contribution. And the last big change, again, is they want more reporting on it. So any new project now, we need the geolocation, which is relatively simple to do. And they also want output and outcome indicators. So for that, essentially, they want to know where the money is going. So example, and then as far as output, they want to know, meters of road, meters of pipe, number of facilities you're serving. And then the outcome metric would be something such as like the increase in residents served or the, increase of cubic meters of water treated, your greenhouse gas reductions, some type of increase in asset lifespan, something just qualify that what the public is getting. And again, the challenge for us would be for any non-government owned asset, if it's not included in your asset management plan, it's not a core asset, it could get difficult to, for some people to actually track these output and indicators. So that'd be another consideration that we should look to put into our contracts. So as far as more information, most of everything I refer to was what it attached in the report, but the UBCM site has a lot of good information. All the new Google AI and everything else, it actually scanned this in the site too. So it's actually helpful too to type questions into that if you have any questions. The other points I want to point out is we often get questions on how much we have and what pool and everything. So the annual financial statements will show the audited total. You can go to the note 12 or the schedule 2. The first one's audited, the second one's not, but they both match. In the annual financial plan, you'll be able to see all the projects and whatnot, and then I have the table of contents directly links to the schedule. If you're ever curious, you can just go to the table of contents and click on it. And for anybody who wants to see the current year budget amendments, it's often the case where we give out projects through the year. So if any members of the public want information on that, they could check the board minutes. So that's what I have. Any questions, let me know.
Thank you for the report. And we have Director Wally.
Yeah, just a quick little recap for my fellow directors here. Every municipality, of course, has their gas tax funding. The electoral area gas tax funding is needed. I wanted to emphasize that. And we currently use it mainly for our infrastructure. For example, in Area A, I use mine to do badly needed upgrades on the Sayward Valley Fire Hall, to purchase a backup generator for Community Hall, to repair Sayward Legion building, that was in the village of Sayward actually, maintain public trails, and in the future, hopefully, to build a community hall in Cayucot. And I'd want to remind the board that every gas tax expenditure by electoral areas is always vetted and approved by the entire board. We can't do anything without your approval. Can't spend a nickel without your approval. So without this funding, the important thing to know is that electoral areas could not possibly afford to maintain their infrastructure. That's what we use it for. Thank you.
Director Lott and then Director Mowini.
Finances, do we have any monies that are in jeopardy of having to be returned because they've exceeded this 5-year threshold?
No, that's new for 2024, and it was actually brought up during a recent presentation, and they admitted that they were never going to actually just immediately take funds after the 5 years, and they would work with the various communities on spending it. But that is the one clause in the contract. Like I say, you could just allocate that into your plan. So if you do have $1 million of unallocated funds, you could put, for future sewer projects or future waterworks projects and show a $0 unallocated balance. If you have it allocated, like I say, in 2040 to do a new sewer plant, and you could reallocate that any time of year. So I don't foresee much risk on that. This also is a permanent plan, so I'm sure they're not looking to start pulling funding anytime soon, given its popularity.
Director Mowini and then Director Lanyon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, for this informative topic and slides. You were really highlighting that non-government assets, if they're funded through this gas tax fund, need to be included in either they need to have an asset management plan, or we have to have an asset management plan for that. And I'm not familiar with like the percentage of projects which we fund with traditionally, like, or could you give us like a ballpark number, like over the last few years, what percentage do we use that funding for non-government organizations versus for our own SRD assets?
Yeah, not offhand. We have done a number of ones, but the ones for non-government owned tend to be relatively small. You're 20, 30,000 for a heat pump. We've done some little bits for Sayward and whatnot. So I don't have the numbers offhand. The one thing that they do bring up though is they encourage larger regional projects that where you couldn't do if you couldn't do the if you couldn't afford it by yourself. That's kind of what they're encouraging for the larger projects. If it's the case, they actually encourage some level of funding for non-government organizations, especially like I say in your capital management plan. If you need an asset, and then there's opportunities to go 50% with another community group or something like that. That's actually encouraged because it's lowers the overall one for the taxpayer. And it's also the case where it doesn't actually have to be included in your asset management plan. It's any long-term capital. Any long-term capital planning. So you could have economic plans. It could be in your parks plan or anything else, because a lot of that would speak to even we have some work in the electoral areas for help aging in place, a more active community, and that kind of speaks to more recreation and everything else. So without specifically naming a specific asset or anything else, so you could argue there. I know we're doing that Rainbow Ridge project with the roadworks. We would have housing needs reports saying we need lower income housing, we need infrastructure to support that. So you could argue that would be, even though that roadworks is not listed in any asset management plan per se, we do have other documents that speak to it. And again, there's no one trigger that says this is eligible, this is not. The board is forced to look at all things considered, even other needs and everything else, and then make the allocation.
If I can, the point of the asset management is that whatever the percentage is, that there's a mechanism to collect funds to replace an aging asset. So, the percentages are all over the place, and what they're getting at with non-government organizations is they don't have a stable and secure way to provide, most of the time, to provide any asset management funding that can be guaranteed, where, like, let's say a regional district would have a service. Included in that service would be requisition, so we could prove that we had create asset management to these projects. So you're not going to put $1 million into something, and 25 years from now you got nothing and it needs complete replacement.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. And I'm wondering, you also mentioned, Mike, about future allocations. And I'm wondering if it would be, or maybe it's already part of your plan for those discussions to come up during the single participant service budget conversations that we have, so that we could, or if it isn't a part of that, maybe we could add that to the conversation that we have in those EA budget meetings.
Yeah, that's a common way we allocate now is we just look at all projects, and then anything that is Community Works funds eligible, we try and prioritize that money. It is restricted funding, so anytime we can spend either internal reserves, which you're freely open to spend on anything, or a restricted source like Community Works funds, we will prioritize spending that first. So yeah, any project that comes through, be it at single participant meetings or even throughout the year, if it is Community Works funds eligible, we'll try and bring that up.
Okay, sorry, if I may, I just thought you said that we had to have allocations designed for funds that may be being saved for longer than 5 years. I'm just thinking about, like, on Quadra Island, we need some infrastructure around water, and also we really need a sewer system replacement, which is much overdue for that. So would we be, obviously that's taking a lot of saving. We might have to hold savings for longer than 5 years, because we're going to need matching funds for that. And so I'm wondering if that's possible to then allocate that in the budget or in the financial plan, so that we know that essentially it's in savings for a sewer plant.
Yeah, absolutely. Supplementary plan is, take any unallocated balance, so we could just look for, direction on how many line items you want to allocate that, whether it be for, high level sewer, recreation, anything else, and then show a zero unallocated balance at the end.
Okay, so I'll expect to have that conversation during our budget meetings. Thank you.
Director Lanyon.
Thank you. So on one of the first slides, it said there's 63,411 plus 4550 per person. I did the math, and it adds up to more than the 543.
Yeah, it's slightly off. Yeah, I thought somebody would do the math, so I did as well. I think it's $350 off or something for as far as the total amount.
Well, is it 63,411 to the First Nations, or how do they factor in there? Because I know you mentioned they have access to funds through other means.
Yeah, we're on the basis of the total fund. So the 10,500 at the bottom, that should be the allocation plus the base amount. So I thought I did the math a couple months ago, and it was relatively close, but not exact. The other thing they do is when they look to the electoral areas, I believe they start rounding something to the nearest thousand. I have to double check on that, but I thought it was relatively close.
Okay, so I guess like there's two issues, because the thrust of this is to determine whether we want to get a report on the options for allocation. So there's two things, like one is it fair? And then does it align in a way that maximizes the delivery of the board's objectives as a whole? If the board has sway over how this decision is made, obviously we're supposed to care about that. So I guess I would leave it up to the area directors to comment as to whether they have any issue with the fairness aspect, with the base plus the per person. And then it's up to the rest of the board to talk about if this is the most effective way to deliver our strategic objectives without tampering too much with the history and tradition of the electoral areas. So I am curious to hear if there's any comment, like status quo is best, or is there a fairness lingering concern within the EAs?
I think that could be a subsequent motion if you want to change that. I mean, we can discuss it now if you want, but. Well, let's first go to Director Sinnott and then Director Wally.
This is somewhat related. I was just reading the policy, and under joint initiatives, it conceives of two EAs potentially joining in. But I'm wondering why it doesn't also conceptually say you can use this fund and cooperate with the municipalities within the SRD, because I could see there could be joint initiatives within the SRD with municipalities as well.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, the fund allows you to do that. We have a bylaw that can be amended at the board's will, but our current bylaw states that it's allocated to the EAs, but that's the impetus of the report. Do you want to stick with the current bylaw, or do you want to make changes to it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking obviously of the regional transportation plan and that how it could fit within the gas tax, but then the city of Camp Brevoort could contribute, Village of Sabre could contribute various different ways other than just having a service fee on all the taxpayers. So gives us lots of options, so long as we can go back and jointly use this. I think I'd recommend that we at least look at expanding the joint initiatives, so that it's clear that it can be more than just the EAs. It can be EAs in the adjoining municipalities. Maybe even the EA from Area D would be interested in jointly going down towards the Comox regional district as well. There might be interest there.
On that note, there has been contributions from the gas tax from Area D to Comox, so anything's available. You can do all kinds of things with it in terms of what you use it for in partnership, certainly, but Area D has actually given money to the Comox Valley Regional District of their gas tax in the past.
So finally, I am interested in hearing from the EAs as to the workability of this, the concept, the approval process. Is it working? Are there any things that need to be improved in terms of the approval process? Because we've put in some hiccups ahead, before it goes to board approval overall. That first of all, it has to go to the EAs, and you have to, I think, have a majority there. And you also have to have the written consent of the director as well. So are those reasonable limitations?
Well, that's a good point. Let's receive the report, and then we can look at option A or option B. So to receive,
Chair, there's been 2 questions that have been asked of the EA directors from Director Lanyon and Director Sinnott. I'm wondering if the EA directors can have a chance to respond to those questions before we move on receipt.
Is it to do with the allocation of funds? Or is it about the receiving of the report?
Well, their questions were if they felt that there was a fairness or equity in the way that it was being distributed at the moment.
Yeah, so that's either option A or option B. So we're just on receiving the report. We can do a subsequent on whether or not want A or B.
Okay, so we're not going to answer that question until after, okay.
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be appropriate for the director to respond to Director Lanyon and
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I think that personally, like from the Area C, I haven't had any concerns with the bylaw as is or with the structure of how it's designed at the moment. I know Director Sinnott was just mentioning that there's an approval process for the funds where it goes to the EA directors first. We all know that everything that goes to the EA committee also comes to the board with a recommendation only, that in the end of the day, the board is all going to vote on. So I don't have a problem with it. I think that, our electoral areas have significant infrastructure deficits. In fact, our board supported requesting a meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs to discuss the infrastructure deficit when we were at UBCM just a couple months ago. And the examples that we brought to that table were largely from the electoral areas. So I think that we need to keep the funds in the EAs, and we all have infrastructure deficits that we're dealing with.
Okay, so we have Director Wally and Director Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree with what Dermody is saying there. And as far as allocation by population, Area A receives the least, but I think that's appropriate with the least population. I think that seems to work well. The fact that it comes to electoral areas first, as Director Mooney pointed out, really doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter what we say. If it comes to the board, you can change it, amend it, do whatever you want with it. We're just making a recommendation. So if you don't like what we do, you can do whatever you want. And that's the way it works. As far as I mentioned before with our infrastructure, if we don't have that money, our infrastructure will fall apart. If you took it away from electoral areas and spend it on some proposed transportation thing, then the fire hall isn't going to be upgraded, and all these other infrastructure things that are essential are just going to fall apart. It's a little bit of money we get. I think it was mine, $864 or something. Not very much money. So I accumulated over a few years, appropriated it to whatever project I have in mind. And when I've accumulated enough, then I try and get the work done. Without that, we're dead in the waters.
Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I agree with the other electoral area directors that currently the way it is being allocated is fair. I think population is the best. I try to use our gas tax money wisely, and I think I've done that. So I'd certainly don't feel that there's any need to make any changes. Thank you.
Is there any further comment or debate on whether or not we should receive the report or not? Director Lott.
It's good to hear from the electoral area directors, and that gives me good direction. But I don't see this motion here was not made by the electoral area directors. Looks like it was made by Dahl and Chapman. So I'd like to hear from Dahl and Chapman as to why this review was requested. What was their concerns with the current allocation formula?
The thought was, the general thought was, if we had a regional project, how can we use that money? And if one director had absolute say, and I know it comes to the board, but, we don't want to tread on people's feet. But if one director said, one regional area, electoral area director said, no, I'm not willing to put money into this project, then what?
I just want clarification through the chairs and maybe the CAO. So it's the board's decision, right? Whatever the recommendations come forward, or the board can initiate it. The EAs don't have any veto power whatsoever, do they?
They don't, but we have a bylaw that dictates all of the money be allocated to the electoral areas by population. So it's not a veto, but it's kind of odd if the board would create a bylaw and say, do it this way. And then when they came to the board, whatever the project item was, the board would vote against the bylaw. So I think the question is here, do you leave the bylaw the way it is, or is the board interested in modifying the bylaw?
Correct.
Through the chair to CEO, just for clarification, so I understand, is that if the board chose to do a regional project like Director Chapman has suggested, and the board voted in favor of that, because the monies through the Works Fund is allocated to each one of the electoral areas, if the directors in the electoral areas didn't support the regional project, would their vote eclipse the vote of the board, or could the board simply vote on that would go, and then the electoral area directors' wishes would just not be followed?
The funding doesn't work that way. The federal government has a formula how they allocate it to the regional district, and that allocation is based on, as Mike showed you, population in electoral areas and a base amount. So they just give it to the board. And then the board has created a bylaw that says how we're going to internally allocate that. And so following that bylaw, the only projects that are quote unquote eligible are projects within electoral areas, because that's what the bylaw states.
Director Mulwiney.
Just for clarification, then that allows the electoral area directors to veto any of the regional projects. That's why this issue is before us, right? And asking for us to make the modification, because we want to remove that ability through the bylaw that we created for the electoral areas directors to object to a regional project and allow this board's decision to go forward, even though they have the bylaw that states that it allocates and the directors for electoral areas opposed to it. Is that the issue right now?
Well, I don't know if that's the issue, but you're technically correct, yes and no. So according to the bylaw, the only EAs can vote on those. However, the board has the ability to amend that bylaw. So right now, the bylaw says it's a vote of 4 folks. And so the other directors, even though it comes to the board, they don't vote on that. However, the board has the ability to amend that bylaw. So if the board wanted a more liberal policy that they actually voted on, they would have to amend that bylaw. But the way the bylaw stands, only EAs vote on those.
Okay, we have Director Mulwiney and then Director Wally.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to address one of Director Lott's questions, which was, why was this motion brought forward? And I scrolled to the bottom to the middle of the report. And I think that this really came to the board because, as our financial officer was explaining, that the agreement for the Community Works Fund has changed this year for the next 10 years. We received a new agreement, and we as a board had to agree to the new agreement with UBCM, who is managing it. And following that, we had a recommendation to receive the report and to execute the agreement, and for a report on the new Community Works Fund agreement to be prepared for the board's consideration. So that is, I think, to me, where this is actually originating from. And I'm interested that we've gotten to this place where we're talking about, it seems like a rhetorical question about if there was an item which needed regional support, and if the electoral area directors decided not to, then because of this rhetorical potentiality that I haven't heard anything like that, we're talking about changing the bylaw. So I would suggest that perhaps it would make more sense to wait until that eventuality comes. And if there is a situation where the board is at odds and wants gas tax funding spent on something and the electoral area directors are unwilling, then that can be looked at that time. I really feel like at this point, going down this road of assigning more staff time to update a bylaw and spending more board time to discuss it and change it when there isn't an issue does not seem like a wise decision.
So you're advocating for option A. Director Wally.
Thank you. Yeah, just one final part. We talked about fairness for a moment here. And what I think would be very unfair if the municipalities who each have their own gas tax funding, they're not bound by any board policy. They can do whatever they want with it. They can spend it on whatever's eligible. If there's a regional project we want to spend gas tax on, well, I think it would be unfair. The municipalities keep their money in their pocket and say, well, let's just take it all from electoral areas. And you're going to bankrupt us. We can't afford to do our infrastructure the way it is. This just doesn't seem right. I think we're supposed to work together here.
Any further comment, Director Lanyon?
I think that's a fair assessment. Conclusion, maybe there's some small room for debate. Just in the sense that, you know, I know from the city of Kamloops, we're funding close to 70% of operations here. We have expectations for growth regionally that give us a return on that investment. So it's really a question of whether the city of Kamloops River and other municipalities want to have the ability to take a strategic direction that benefits the whole region, even if it may deprive a year or two of gas tax to that specific project within the area. So, and we've run into this, you know, it's Area A in particular. No, not attacking you. I understand what you're doing, but it's like, you know, anything that costs you money you don't want, it seems. And I know there's more behind it. And you're not a simple man. I'm not saying you're a simple man, don't worry.
No, but you're not putting a cent of your gas tax money into the regional district. I mean, come on.
Well, it's, you know, kind of all in the same pocket.
Not the same pocket.
It is. Yeah, it's all, anything that's not funded with gas tax comes from requisition. And the city of Kamloops River has much higher requisitions than Area A. So it's a question of how much tax do you want to pay? And I think it is a question also of just, you know, can we get a better regional benefit, which is the reason I am here at this board table. I'm not here for Kamloops River right now. I'm here to grow the region's economy and well-being. So I'm just saying there might be opportunities that you would resist that, and so making a change like this would give a bit more power to the municipalities who are putting the absolute lion's share of the bill.
So I have Director Rice, the CAO, okay, so Director Rice, you're next.
Just to follow up on that, Ben, I have given gas tax money to another regional district.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that present the issue at the board, let the directors make the decisions. And if the rest of the board doesn't agree with it, then we can make changes. But I would like to be able to approach everything with an open mind, and I look at everything with an open mind, and I'll make my decision accordingly. What you're trying to suggest right now is let's change the bylaw because of whatever. Let's approach that when it actually happens. Thank you.
Director Sinnott and then Director Lanyon.
This is a question for staff. Because we allocate these community work funds to specific EAs and it creates sort of a certainty of flow of funds, is it constraining our thoughts going forward as to how to improve the capital infrastructure? In other words, are we saying, well, they get this money, that's all we have to do? Or are we, as an organization, actually addressing the greater needs of the EAs out of the regional budgets? I mean, I'm concerned that we create this little funding method and we close the book and we move on and we don't think of the greater good.
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer for that because it depends on the project and the electoral area. For example, Fire Hall in Area A, that's improving the capital infrastructure, the sewer in Quadra Island. But let's say we've seen requests from Cortez for NGOs for things like heat pumps or a pickleball court or something. So the fund and the requirements of the gas tax fund help dictate those things, and you can see the trend is going towards, hey, look, I'm just going to use this because it's an easy example and it's come up recently. So there was a request at EA's to help support a pickleball court on Cortez. I'm not saying this is good, bad, or indifferent. So is that a part of a long-term capital infrastructure? We have a regional recreation facility that we're spending $72 million to upgrade. So do you have a long-term capital plan that is replacing? So are you funding a pickleball court that's not part of a long-term capital plan that does not have asset management funding? And are you replacing that with funding that instead of Strathcona Gardens? Now you take another example, the Area A Fire Hall or Area C, the sewer replacement, 100% that is funding long-term capital. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on what the project is. It's project dependent on whether they fit that criteria or not. Lots of them do, some of them don't. But the rules are helping us funnel that towards long-term infrastructure capital planning.
No, my question is directed more to the closed-mindedness of our board thinking. If I'm hearing Director Wally saying there's severe infrastructure needs in the Sayward Area A area, and this is his little pot of money he's got to play with and it's not sufficient, then are we having the bigger discussion on the board to improve their life there? I mean, that's my concern. The constraint isn't really the bylaws a problem, but it might constrain our thinking overall. And we should be looking at various initiatives in different electoral areas if there's severe need and they don't have the ability to fund their infrastructure. Are we doing that in terms of our strategic thinking?
Well, Director Mawhinney can chime in, but I would say in terms of our thinking and our advocacy, yes. Like we were just at UBCM, here's a huge problem, right, that the gas tax isn't going to solve. Area C, we have a sewer infrastructure replacement problem. We need, let's say, $10 million worth of infrastructure replacement. Let's say Area A has $1 million in gas tax to allocate. There's a $9 million gap in there. Even if there is a provincial funding program, it's unlikely it will be 100%. So how do we fund that? You could triple the rates in the sewer service area there, and you're not going to do anything. So we are doing advocacy work because I don't think there's anything in financial planning that we can do to get us anywhere in the stratosphere of where we need to be. It's a huge problem for all rural communities across the province that the province is fully aware of and doesn't have a plan for.
So let's go to the speakers list.
Chair, if I may just speak to that point for a minute, because we're discussing the Area C or Quadra Island sewer infrastructure
You're
deficit.
next on the speakers list,
Was
so
I? Oh,
this
great.
is your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I wanted to address Director Sinnott's question and if the electoral areas are doing the work and planning and thinking strategically as well. And I'd just like to say that, the year that I arrived and we did our financial planning, the sewer rates for the Quathiaski Cove went up by 19.5%. And that was because until that point, there had been no capital reserve. And so the capital reserve has grown quite a lot in the last 2 years, but of course it's nowhere near where it needs to be. So I just want to say that I think that we as directors, and I certainly am as a director, I'm looking bigger picture and recognizing that we have to do work within our own financial plans as well as counting on gas tax funds to support the needs of our communities.
Director Lanyon, you're next.
Yeah, no, I'll just say again, the gas tax is just displacing what would be requisition. If you have a built-in a deficit for replacement of infrastructure, you're under requisitioning. And you can always catch up at the time when it's time to replace it, and it'll be a lump sum. Why are you disagreeing?
Enough population. 225
Yeah.
Mike,
No,
please.
I don't think I'm wrong because of that. I'm saying like I mean, and maybe some parts of the structure of SRD are non-viable to have an independent area A, is what you're saying. You cannot survive on your own. That's what you just said. So, and what would the requisition need to be in order to fund it? Do we know that number? Like, is it some astronomical figure that makes me right about that?
Well, with something like a sewer service in Kwasniewski Cove, when it was built with secondhand components. And so, you know, whoever made that decision at that time, that was the decision that was made. There are, I think, roughly 200 homes that are attached to it, and now it needs to be replaced. And we're looking at at least $4 million to replace it. So expecting or having any idea that 200 homes are going to be able to support something like that without the support of gas tax funds is untenable.
So gas tax is $45 a house. Like I'm talking big picture here, not gas tax. But like, if we're having this discussion of like, oh, this is what we depend on, it's $45 a house that we're talking about. Grow your economy.
Well, the main question was, and let's use an example. What's in the reserve fund now, Mark? 7 million? 7.5?
Yeah, that was about 7 million, I believe, at the end of 2023.
So let's assume, and this is hypothetical. Assume the electoral area directors would like to help Director Mawhinney getting a sewer treatment plant. And are saying, this is regionally significant because it's a tourist area. We want it, you know, clean and pristine. So what mechanism is there in the bylaw to allow electoral area directors to direct some of their funds to help Director Mawhinney, just as an example? Director Wally.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion for political suicide. You'd see a brand-new board next to her, especially in the electoral areas.
So we're not thinking really regionally.
Chair, the bylaw actually speaks to joint initiatives being permitted within electoral areas. It can be undertaken in 2 or more areas on such terms as may be agreed. So
Right.
I think that's already considered and included.
Okay. So we have the question on the floor to receive. Director Mawhinney on receipt.
Move receipt.
It's already moved and seconded. We're looking to see if there's any more discussion on the receipt, whether or not we should vote on it or not. On the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
I'd like to move option A, that no changes to be made to the Community Works Gas Tax Fund allocation formula at this time.
Seconded by Director Wally. Any discussion? Director Lanyon.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against. I think there's been enough productive discussion here. And I understand the area directors don't want to open this can of worms. It's an election issue, potentially. But let's do it. I'm voting against this. I'm going to move option B.
Okay, we have notification.
Oh, I'm saying I'm voting against option A, and I'm going to bring option B.
And he's saying if that fails, then he'll bring option B as a subsequent. He says if. So it's been moved and seconded. Option A. All in favor? Opposed?
You have 5 opposed, right?
Yeah. So it fails.
So that's tie vote.
It's a-
You have a
We have 11 folks here.
Director Davis, what he's,
And
In favor.
Okay,
In favor.
Thank you.
So we had, how many, sorry?
5 opposed.
And 6 in
6.
favor?
Yeah, so carries.
Yeah.
Okay, that resolution has passed. Okay. Oh. People want a break? Let's recess. Oh, lunch? So let's,
Yeah. I don't think those numbers added up there. Kerr, Sinnott, Dahl, Lanyon, Baker, Chapman is 6. So it would have to be 5 supported, 6 opposed. I would suggest, I think the math is wrong.
Did you say the opposed again?
I think opposed was Kerr, Sinnott, Dahl, Lanyon, Baker, Chapman.
Sorry, I didn't get there.
Were you opposed? So I think the vote was 5 in favor, 6, we have 11, am I right? Okay.
so if 6 are against, then it failed.
If the chair wants to call the question again,
Well, let's call the question. Let's take a,
individual poll the members then.
okay, Director Rice.
No.
Well, no, your support. The motion is,
You're yes or no?
you're
Yes in
yes, I
favor?
believe.
Which motion are we voting on?
You,
Option A.
option A,
Option A,
To
I'm
leave-
in favor of A.
yeah.
Okay.
In favor.
Opposed.
And Davis.
And Davis is in favor.
In favor.
So 6 opposed, it fails.
6 opposed, so it fails. Right. Okay, so when we're taking the vote, the motion to keep things as they are fails. And is there a subsequent resolution being offered?
Yes, I'd move option B, that a further report with options for allocating Community Works Gas Tax Fund be prepared for board's consideration.
Seconder?
I'll second it.
Director Sinnott seconds that motion. In speaking now, Director Wally?
Yeah, I just want to point out, not with any hostility, but, you know, the board sometimes wonders why electoral areas have no interest in ever joining joint services with the municipalities. That's the answer. You guys would kill us.
I'll rebut, I'll say no, we won't. You're talking about the old board. You're putting up resistance that's just hurting yourself.
Okay, any discussion on the option B? Director Sinnott?
Yeah, I'd just like to hear more from Councillor Lanyon, if there's any specifics he'd like to express to staff that he's looking at. I want to just have clarity that it wouldn't just be between EAs for joint ventures. And I was looking at potential regional, planning as well, instead of just being very EA driven.
Well, I could probably answer that because there's enough models out there. There's 27 regional districts and they're probably got 9 different models out there, from what we're doing to a combination of projects, regional, sub-regional, EA. So there's enough models out there that what we'll do is we'll likely just bring you back the models that exist because those are the only options that really exist, and there's probably 4 or 5 of them.
So, Mr. Chair, could I have one more question to staff?
Sure.
So if this passes, will the municipalities be able to rip off the current stuff that we have in our individual electoral area gas tax reserves, or will that stay there?
No.
Well, it would be up to the board, the policy. I mean, if you, I don't know.
retroactive?
There's nothing on the table yet. All we're gonna do is bring options for allocating. I don't think we've talked about anything that has been allocated or reserves. I'm just gonna bring you options for allocating the funds that are delivered to the SRD.
Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And without hostility, I would just like to remind the EAs that what you see here, this building, this staff, this organization, would not be here without the inclusion of the city of Campbell River. It would not exist.
But to answer the question specifically, the city, the municipalities get their own funds, and the funds allocated here in the regional district are not available to the municipalities unless an electoral area director decides that they want to partner on a project. Am I not correct in that, staff?
That's correct. I'd call that likely a regional project, though.
Right. So we have a motion on the floor for option B for Bravo. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed. Martin, are you opposed or in favor?
You're muted.
In favor.
Thank you.
By 4 opposed, so motion carried.
5 opposed, and
5 opposed?
Sorry.
yeah, it's the same vote, but flipped.
So Edith, just 4?
Just pull the members again if you.
Okay.
Opposed, just the opposed, hold their hands up.
Anybody opposed, please hold your hands up high so I can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Martin, I believe, is opposed. Oh, Martin, just for clarity, Director Davis, do you support a further report looking at allocation options?
In favor.
All right.
I think he's confused.
There's 4 opposed. So the motion passes. Okay, we're going to recess for how long? 20 minutes? Or do you want to eat and work at the same time? Well, let's take a break. I think we need a real break. We're getting a little punchy. Yeah. So we're going to break for lunch for 20 minutes. And the next item is the item number 3, support services cost allocation, that the report from the chief administrative officer be received.
Second.
It's Director Lott and Director Mooney seconding.
So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll say a few words about this. So it's, the intent of regional districts is you're trying to take this pie and you're trying to split it up as evenly as you can. And there's things that can be split up very easily. There's things that need some kind of subjective formula to it that's not an exact science. And then there's some things that are liberal within staff's ability to allocate funds based on what's going on. So we have many different levels, and if you've read this, and hopefully it makes sense to you. If you don't, I am just going to explain some things at a high level that we do. So we have certain groupings of folks in the regional district that that collectively everyone pays into. So general government, the easy one in there is corporate services and myself. So that's allocated out all on property assessments. That's a pretty easy one. And then we have formulas for how we allocate different things within the regional district, trying to find a fair way to cut that pie up. I think myself and the CFO agree, it happened before our time here, is that this regional district decides to do a lot of allocations based on finance transactions. I don't know how that was ever decided at the time when the electoral areas are split, or the regional districts are split up. Maybe that's the way the Comox Valley does it. But I can give you a high-level example of how some challenges with using that. So if you do transaction-based to find out allocations, and you buy a fire truck for $1 million, that's one transaction. And if you go to the swimming pool and you pay for an admission, that's one. We can all identify that that's kind of ridiculous and not the best way to do it. We allocate through different areas of the regional district. So let's say EA planning, that's something that's paid for just by the electoral areas. 100% of the time that's spent on that is through electoral areas. We have liability that we use some assessment risk on. We have projects that we fluctuate throughout the year. So let's say we have staff that are going to spend a considerable amount of time on a capital project. We'll take the engineering staff and we'll allocate more of their time for that year, and then we'll readjust that the following year. So it's quite complicated. It's complicated in every regional district. However, the one thing for this group, I think, in all of what's in this report is to look at an opportunity, and it would be my recommendation to look at another allocation policy options that we have that will provide opportunities other than transaction-based, because I think transaction-based is archaic. I don't think it hits a lot of marks in terms of assessing fairness. And we have other complications too in terms of, and a lot of these happened before my time. I don't even know how we came to them with office space allocations. So there's things that are going to be subjective in there, but there's some things that are formula based. And the other thing that selfishly that we hope the committee supports and the board is looking at another cost allocation formula. Transactions is very labor intensive for us. To track transactions for the finance staff and do allocations by that is very onerous. There's a much simpler way, there's many simpler ways to do it that gets you likely to a very similar spot. So all of that said, the report identifies how we split this pie into numerous pieces through formula and subjective ways, and recommending or providing options to the board that we either stick with this formula or we bring back alternate formulas. I don't even know, there's unlikely a huge sway in, if any of you were paying attention when 911 came back with 9 different formula allocation changes for how funds are allocated and charged out with that. They don't generally, at the end of the day, they're not gonna have, it's unlikely they're gonna have a huge swing from munis to EAs or this, that, or the other. But they can do two things. One, they can provide a more simple, transparent way of providing those, and they can take up less staff time to do something. So happy to answer any questions.
Sir, first on the speaking list is Director Wally.
I wonder staff recalls before Mrs. Christensen, she was our CFO quite a while ago, and she was the one that sold the board on the current system that we have. But before that, we had another system that I was quite in favor of. Do you recall what that was?
I personally don't. I think our CFO has done some research, and only one other regional district does it on transactions.
Right.
I can't follow, I don't understand the logic behind transactions. I don't personally support it, and I don't know what was before, but there's many models out there that we can bring without a ton of effort.
Right. I know the reason for it, and we'll tell you after privately. But anyway, if you could research the way we did it previously, that was quite a good system.
I thought you were going to tell us how it was done, Director Wally. I'm disappointed. So the motion on the floor is that sorry?
Motion's just received, there's options.
Yeah, the motion right now is just to receive. So Director Barker moves. Oh, it's already been moved and seconded? Okay. Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, I got lost my way there. Okay, so, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. So entertain a subsequent resolution.
I'll make an option.
Director Lott moves option B.
Second.
Director Sinnott seconds it.
That motion is that a further report be prepared for the board's consideration that investigates allocation options for support services costs. And in that, Director Wally, we'll look at what we previously did. We'll examine everything that's out there, because there's nothing new that isn't out there. We're just bringing those options back for the board's consideration.
Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious, when the report comes back, assuming that the board votes in favor of it, will it sort of identify, you're saying like there's quite a few different methods, and you're saying that often they would get you to a similar spot. So will the report sort of identify the pros and cons, or the?
Yeah, the changes. I mean, I'm assuming the board's going to be interested in two things: what those changes mean to their areas. Yeah, or less. And I'm just using, again, there will be some adjustments. I don't anticipate net it's gonna make a ton of difference. It will be more transparent, it'll be simpler, and it won't take as much time for staff to keep tracking this. But yes, we'll, similar to 911, when I literally think they had 10 different options.
Yeah.
And importantly, what they showed as the financial implications to those 10 different options. So if memory serves me correct, maybe Director Rice remembers better than I do, but when they looked at 911, the impact of this regional district went from, maybe $5,000 less to paying $12,000 more, over millions and millions of dollars. It had different impacts to different areas, but definitely that will be key to show what that allocation policy would look like in terms of financial impact, good, bad, or indifferent to areas, and the effort that it takes us to do that work.
So the question then is this going to be done in time for financial planning, or is this for a subsequent year other than 2025? This is
No,
pretty short
I guess
notice.
it is mid-October. Likely for, maybe a hybrid, but likely for 2025.
Yeah,
But
okay.
it's overdue too. We've been using this for well over 10 years, and
Okay,
it's overdue.
let's look at it then. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. And the last item is the report from the CAO concerning the next meeting.
Second.
Director Wally?
So just a
Second.
reminder to the committee that we don't, on our calendar, we don't regularly schedule COW meetings. So we have a few agenda items for the next one coming up. We've done our best to scour everyone's calendar and feel that Wednesday, November 27th is a safe landing spot.
Available day. Director Wally?
Yeah, I'm just curious, we don't hold these for nothing. What is the agenda? What do you got up your sleeve?
I don't have anything up my sleeve, but I can tell you two things that that I have in mind. And again, just for those folks that, I guess I take the liberty of holding cows when the discussion is gonna, let's say, dominate. So this is the same group that's gonna vote at the board. So presumably not much changes, but as you can see, we talked about a couple items for a couple hours. And if we included those on board agendas, we'd be here all day, which nobody wants. So I take items that I think have significant relevance or consuming time and make it a cow out of that. There is, in my mind, two things. One, I'm going to do a Connected Coast update at that meeting. And I believe there is a motion for a tourism discussion. So those, and trying to limit it to, so we're not here that long, trying to limit it to 2 or 3 items on that.
Regional Tourism Service.
On the 27th of November, is that not when we have our Natural Resource Committee meeting?
I don't think we've solidified that date to the group. Is
Yet we are hoping to still get a couple of responses back, but I believe I had a deadline of today.
was the 27th one of those days?
27th is the majority choice right now.
You might be here for 2 meetings.
Okay, sounds good.
Director
Or we set the meeting for the 27th, so the Resource Committee meeting will have to be on the 13th then. That was the 2 days, right? The 13th and I voted for the 13th, so I like that plan.
Okay, maybe it is the 13th then. Scheduling meeting dates is the worst part of the job. Okay, well, because I'm not looking at a
Just a question to the chair, are we talking about the same time on the 27th?
likely unless this didn't work for folks.
I'd prefer an early morning start.
Was-
Because you're up at quarter.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to propose that we start the meeting at 6 or something like that.
Yeah, could do that.
Yeah, that's.
we will if Chair Baker will second that motion.
Can't make it too bad.
Or 6 p.m.
6 a.m.
Doesn't go to board anyway.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. How about this, if because that'll give us time with this natural resources, get this poll back out too, if we can settle on the 27th and this will come to the board on the 30th, then if anyone has conflicts, please bring those forward.
Okay, any further discussion on setting a meeting date? And this is for receipt only? This resolution, and all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so, Director Rice.
We're done.
Yes.
Did we?
No, we haven't touched B yet.
Yeah, need the motion on the meeting date.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Don't ask Director Rice, because he's probably gonna add in the 6 a.m. part to the resolution.
I'll move that COW meeting be November 27, 2024.
At 6.
Seconded by Director Dahl, moved by Director Wally. Any questions? Comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Director Wally moves termination and Director Dahl seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Kermit, did you say no to the 27th on natural resources because you're busy, or did you have a conflict on that?
I wanted it to be as soon as.
Okay, but you don't have a conflict on the
He just wants an ASAP.
I think early, no, but what has the?
You know, we shouldn't have,
Minutes that were adopted today,
we shouldn't have had lunch. We just kept going right through and then we can take a leisurely lunch.
who would have thought those other items wouldn't take 8 hours?
No.